Hello, welcome to the final part of part 2. The topic is the dogma on Mary's motherhood. This is part 2C. We're going to cover the final issue, and that is Mary's genealogy, and then Jesus' genealogy, and the family relationships of Mary. We begin by taking a look at not only Matthew chapter 1 verse 1 to 16 or Luke chapter 3 verse 23 to 38. We're talking about the genealogies of Jesus as recorded in the New Testament. On the left you see Matthew, his genealogy. On the right you see Luke. I make right up off the top to make the distinction that Matthew's genealogy descends from Abraham. He begins with Abraham and goes to Jesus. Luke, on the other hand, ascends to Adam. He begins with Jesus and ends up with Adam. So there's a little table on the left. I do not have all the names in the genealogy listed on this frame. I've left off all the names before Abraham in Luke, but I have also reversed Luke's genealogy, so his is descending for purposes of understanding it. On the left you see the two colors. You see the blue line represents Luke, and the red line beginning only with Abraham represents Matthew. I just want you to see some things here, and if you've copied the PowerPoint series, you've got a copy of this at your elbow. I'm going to make some points that Matthew's genealogy is the paternal or royal line of Jesus, and Luke's genealogy is the maternal line or the genetic line. It will make the genealogies much more meaningful for you. Jesus Christ is the descendant of David. Very important, and it's important that we know that, and in the Word of God that we can demonstrate that. Now, if he is from the line of David, then certainly Joseph could not be his immediate paternal bloodline, since Joseph was not his natural father. That raises the issue of Matthew's genealogy that ends with Joseph. And the bloodline could only be traced through his mother Mary. She alone provided 100% of his genetic material, and thus provided flesh of the offspring of David. This is Romans 1 that we saw in part 2b, where Paul said concerning his son who was born to him according to the flesh of the offspring of David. Matthew begins his genealogy in chapter 1 verse 1, the book of the origin of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. John, in his Gospel, chapter 7, he writes, does not Scripture say that it is of the offspring of David, and from Bethlehem, the village where David lived, that the Christ is to come? Paul's second letter to his bishop Timothy writes, remember that Jesus Christ rose from the dead and was descended from David. Luke chapter 1, verse 32, Luke writes, God will give him the throne of David his father, and he shall be king over the house of Jacob forever. Those are the words of the angel Gabriel to Mary. And lastly, Paul in his letter to the people of Galatia writes, but when the fullness of time came, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law. Now there are plentiful verses that Jesus is affirmed in the Bible to be the son of David, and I have them there. You can look them up on your own. Now, Jesus Christ is descended from David, but through the genealogy of Mary, and through that genealogy of Mary, it is only implied, and we'll see the issue in a moment. Jesus had no human father. There was no human exchange for the conception of Jesus, and so the human bloodline cannot be traced through Joseph. Now, Jewish law required that were to be through the line of the males, not the females. Look, in the book of Numbers in the Pentateuch, so Moses and Aaron took these men who had been designated and assembled the whole community on the first day of the second month. Every man of 20 years or more then declared his name and lineage according to the clan and ancestral house. This record was kept right up to the time of Jesus and the destruction of the temple of Jerusalem. Accurate records of genealogies were very important to the Jews. That's the only way they remembered who they were. The book of Chronicles, First Chronicles, contains 11 chapters of genealogies alone. So it was an established literary form, for instance, and there were different kinds of genealogies. The Jewish historian Josephus wrote that public records recorded genealogies from the oldest to the youngest, and private records went from the youngest back to the oldest. Now, what we've already seen very briefly of Matthew's and Luke's genealogies, one is a public record, the other is a private record. This is done in part in order to prevent unqualified persons from gaining positions through their ancestry. There's a story in Ezra and Nehemiah where some priests were rejected because they could not prove their Levitical ancestry. Ancestry was very important. How often in the New Testament we think of the house of David, and that Jesus was born of the house of David. His lineage was that of David. That's how they knew. They had the genealogy. Now, because the custom of using male genealogies only, the question is, how could an ancestral line of Jesus be shown through Mary? Very good question. It appears, I smile because that's the way our God works, he left a convenient loophole in this law that would allow women to be included in the ancestral line if they met two stringent conditions. Look at again the book of Numbers. Therefore tell the Israelites, God said, if a man dies without leaving a son, you shall let his heritage pass on to his daughter. Again in Numbers, this is what the Lord commands with regard to the daughters of Salphahad. They may marry anyone they please, provided they marry into a clan of their ancestral tribe, so that no heritage of the Israelites will pass from one tribe to another, but all the Israelites will retain their own ancestral heritage. Big thing among the Jews. Now it has to be shown, number one, that the father of Mary had no sons. That would meet the first condition. And secondly, that Mary married into her own tribe of Judah. Take a look at the book of Genesis for a moment. You, Judah, God said, shall your brothers praise. Your hand on the neck of your enemies. The sons of your father shall bow down to you. Judah, like a lion's whelp, you have grown up on prey, my son. He crouches like a lion recumbent, the king of beasts. Who would dare rouse him? The scepter shall never depart from the mace from between his legs, while tribute is brought to him, and he receives the people's homage. He tethers his donkey to the vine, his purebred ass to the choicest stem. In wine he washes his garments, his robe in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, his teeth are whiter than milk. What praise in the mouth of God for the tribe of Judah. All right, the first condition, did Mary have brothers? Well, we have no record of it. The Bible does not mention brothers, but it does mention that she had a sister. You may not have known this. In John's Gospel, now there were standing at the cross of Jesus his mother Mary, and his mother's sister, Mary of Cleophas, and the third Mary, Mary Magdalene. It is thought that the sister of Mary was Salome, the wife of Zebedee and the mother of James and John. We will see this in a genealogy graphic before we finish today. In the Jewish culture in those days, the mother, who was widowed, assuming that Joseph was dead at this time, would have gone to her father or brother or to her other children. Apparently her father was dead, that she had no brothers, and that she had no other children, so Jesus gave her to John. Again in the 19th chapter of John. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple there whom he loved, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. Then he said to his disciple, Behold your mother. From that hour the disciple took her into his home. So the words of John 19 and the lack of evidence of male siblings strongly suggest the first condition was satisfied. The second condition is a bit more involved. Mary married within her own tribe, did she? Matthew's genealogy says the book of the origin of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac, Isaac begot Jacob, Jacob begot Judah, all the way down to Jesse begot David the king. And David the king begot Solomon of the former wife of Uriah, known as Bathsheba. And the genealogy continues until verse 16. And Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary, and of her was born Jesus, who is called Christ. The descendant of David is Solomon. In Luke's genealogy, a different son of David is listed. Matthew clearly shows that the bloodline of Joseph does go back to the tribe of Judah and through King David. If Jesus Christ is the son of David, then his mother Mary has to be also of the house of David, and therefore by implication of the tribe of Judah. Now we've already seen in Romans 1, it could not have been said that the son was born according to the flesh of the offspring of David unless Mary were of Davidic descent. Take a look at Luke's Gospel, chapter 1. Now in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a town of Galilee called Nazareth to a virgin betrothed to a man named Joseph of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. It has been shown that Mary is implied as being of the house of David, right there in Luke 1:32. If she were not of the house of David, then clearly Jesus Christ could not have been a descendant of David, as do so many verses attest. She married within her tribe by implication, and also the second condition appears to be satisfied. Consequently, both conditions for the bloodline to continue through the female line are satisfactorily met by Mary, if it can be shown that she is of the same tribe of Judah through David as is her spouse, Joseph. Now we need to review the bloodline of Joseph with some added observations. First of all, Matthew addressed his gospel to Jews like himself, Jews who follow the law of Moses, the Mosaic law. So he wrote the genealogy of Jesus Christ in his first chapter, and he was careful to meet the legal requirements of the Mosaic law. His was the public record, as we explained earlier, in that he begins with Abraham and shows the line going through David and then Solomon and all the way down to Jesus Christ. In verse 16 he says, "And Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary, and of her was born Jesus, who was called Christ." Matthew depicts Jesus Christ as the Messiah. Remember, the word Christ in Greek is Christos, and in Hebrew is Hamashiach, which is the word Messiah. Clearly Matthew said that the blood father, begot of Joseph, was Jacob. Matthew had satisfied the Mosaic law by showing the male ancestry of Jesus by going through Joseph instead of Mary. Remember, this genealogy shows the legal or royal or public record of descent and not the human descent. Now, more evidence that Matthew shows the legal line of descent is in Matthew 1:11-12, where a man named Jeconias is mentioned. But in Jeremiah chapter 22 regarding Jeconias, it stated that, "For there shall not be a man of his seed that shall sit on the throne of David." Now Luke, on the other hand, has quite a different account of the genealogy of Jesus Christ. He wrote his gospel to address the Gentile pagans, like himself, that's where he came from, who were not under the Mosaic law and for the most part were unfamiliar with it. He was also a physician. His interest, no doubt, was not in the legal aspect of the genealogy of Jesus, but the human or natural bloodline, depicting Jesus as Son of Man. Luke's genealogy begins with Jesus Christ and goes backward, just the opposite of Matthew, who started back and came forward. Luke's genealogy follows the custom of private records, as we've already explained. Notice in Luke chapter 3 that Luke's genealogy does go from Jesus Christ through David and back to Judah, continuing all the way to Adam and then to God. By doing this, Luke shows a tie between the new Adam, which Paul mentions in Corinthians, and the first Adam. However, Luke shows the descendant of David to be not Solomon, but Nathan. It's Matthew who draws the genealogy of Jesus through Solomon. This alludes to the possibility that Luke's genealogy is for a different person other than Joseph. It's another bloodline. We know that. Look closer at verse 23 with the three Bible translations. The first translation is the Confraternity of Christian Doctrine, and Jesus himself, when he began his work, was about 30 years of age, being, as was supposed, the son of Joseph, the son of Heli, the son of Matthat. The New American Bible translates, so when Jesus began his ministry, he was about 30 years of age. He was the son, as was thought, of Joseph, the son of Heli, the son of Matthat. Now then, King James Version translates the same line, and Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being, as was supposed, the son of Joseph, which was the son of Heli, which was the son of Matthat. Now, the first reading, this verse may seem to be something amiss. The verse appears to say that the father of Joseph is Heli, H-E-L-I. Yet in Matthew, that it was Jacob. How can Joseph have two fathers? There it is from Matthew chapter 1. And Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary, and of her was born Jesus, who is called Christ. Now, in many places in Scripture, one has to revert to underlying Greek texts in order to understand fully the verse. The Greek word used for as was supposed or as was thought is nomizo, which either means to hold by custom or usage, to follow by custom or usage. It is a custom, or it is received usage, is passed down, or to deem, to think, to suppose. This matter can be made clearer by interpreting the verse as, when Jesus began his ministry, he was about 30 years of age. He was the son, so it was thought, of Joseph, of Heli. The underlying Greek text supports this interpretation. Now, I don't mean to impress on you Greek, but you have in front of you Luke chapter 3, verse 23. You've got in red the Greek, and below it the English translation. What we're interested in is the second line. Of course, the first line, and himself. Now, this is in the Greek word order. And himself was Jesus, about 30 old, being, as was supposed, the son of Joseph, of Heli, of Matthat. Huios is the Greek word for son. Now notice it says son of Joseph, of Heli, of Matthat. The word son before Heli is not in the Greek text. So in order to trace the bloodline of Jesus through Heli, one would first have to go through Mary, his mother. This shows that Heli would be the blood father of Mary and the father-in-law of Jesus. Of Joseph. Even though the name of Mary is not listed, in order to comply with Jewish custom, it is certainly implied. Matthew 1:15 shows that Matthan is the father of Jacob. Luke 3 says that Matthat was the father of Heli. It is not known if Matthan and Matthat are the same person. If they are the same person, that would indicate that Joseph and Heli could be brothers if they had the same mother, or half-brothers if they had different mothers, or one of them could have been adopted from the tribe of Judah. Julius Africanus, who lived 160 to 240 A.D., wrote in his epistle to Aristides that Jacob and Heli were half-brothers. Now, the Bible makes no distinction between genetic birth and adoption. In 2 Samuel, where Michal, the daughter of Saul and the wife of David, had no children. Yet in 2 Samuel, it says Michal had 5 sons. In reality, they were adopted sons of Merab. So Jacob was the genetic father of Joseph. Heli, the father of Mary, was Joseph's father-in-law, his legal father. Additionally, Luke was devoted to the Blessed Virgin. Beautiful accounts of her in his gospel are all his. Knowing full well that Joseph was not the human father of Jesus, and being a physician as Luke was, he would naturally show the ancestral bloodline to go through Mary. Now, Matthew's genealogy, which is clearly the royal, the public genealogy, lists 3 breaks in the Mosaic law. This indicates in the first few verses of the New Testament that the Old Covenant, and with it the Mosaic law, is coming to an end, being fulfilled, and soon to be superseded by the New Covenant. The first break that Matthew makes is females are listed. We've already said that genealogies were through the male descendants. But he mentions Tamar, he mentions Rahab, he mentions Ruth from the book of Ruth. He mentions Bathsheba, the former wife of Uriah. He also lists sinners. Tamar was a deceiver, Rahab a harlot, Bathsheba an adulteress, and Solomon an idolater. By naming sinners, God has shown that his ways are not our ways. And lastly, Gentiles are listed. Tamar was a Canaanite, Rahab a Canaanite, Ruth a Moabite, Bathsheba a Hittite. Foreigners like these symbolize God's desire to save all, with no distinction between Jew or Gentile. What about Joachim, Was he not the father of Mary and Anne as her mother? Joachim is mentioned as the father of Mary in the following apocryphal books. We saw that already in this series. The Proto-Evangelium of James, the Gospel of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin, the Book of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Joachim is another form of Joachim and Eliakim. Look at 2 Kings. And Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim the son of the Josias king in the room of Josias his father, and turned his name to Joachim. And in 2 Chronicles, and he made Eliakim his brother king in his stead over Judah and Jerusalem, and he turned his name to Joachim. Subsequently, over the centuries, it's probable that the name Eliakim was shortened to Eli, as you can see, or Eli. Eli is merely the Greek form of the Hebrew Eli. The high priest in 1 Samuel is called Heli in the Chandler, Reams, and Eli in the New American Bible translation. You can see that the differences in translations will show different names at different times. We're talking about too many different languages transliterated differently. So there are many name changes and different spellings of persons. A person's name in Scripture, Matthew himself is called Levi, for instance. So Joachim and Heli appear to be one and the same person. Now Joseph did adopt Jesus as his son by fulfilling the ancient law for adoptions at the time of Christ. The adopting father had two requirements. He had to name the child. Do you remember what the angel Gabriel said to Joseph in a dream? That he was to name the child Jesus. And the second requirement was to teach the child his trade or craft. And what do the synoptics say about Jesus when he was teaching in Nazareth? They said that, is not Joseph his father? Is this not the carpenter? We know that Joseph fulfilled these requirements. Coming down the home stretch, let's look at the family relationship of Jesus. And I want to begin with a difficult chapter out of the Gospel of Mark. Jesus departed from there and came to his native place accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who had heard him were astonished. They said, where did this man get all this? What kind of wisdom has been given him? What mighty deeds are wrought by his hands? Is he not the carpenter? This is the verse I was talking about a moment ago. Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Now you see why this is here. Who are these brothers of Jesus? And are not his sisters? Mark continues here with us. And they took offense at him. Jesus said, a prophet is not without honor except in his native place and among his own kin and his own house. So he was not able to perform any mighty deed there, apart from curing a few sick people by laying his hands on them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. Take a look at a number of verses from the New Testament mentioning sons. Matthew 27, among them, this is at Calvary, were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. Wow, if we could put all these sons together with their parents, we would have the answer. In Mark chapter 15, there were also women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of the younger James, and of Joses and Salome. In Mark 16, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, this is after the resurrection, Mary, the mother of James and Salome, brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And in Luke 24, the women were Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Mary, the mother of James. The others who accompanied them also told this to the apostles. In 1 Jude, he begins his letter, Jude, a slave of Jesus Christ and brother of James. John 19 spoke of standing at the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. In Matthew, the names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon, called Peter, and his brother Andrew. And then James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. And Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas, and Matthew, the tax collector. And then James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simeon the Cananean, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. And finally, in Luke 6, when the day came, he called his disciples to himself, and from them he chose 12, whom he also named apostles. Simon, who named Peter, his brother Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, and James, the son of Alphaeus, Simon, who was called a zealot, and Judas, the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. In Matthew 13, he came to his native place. and taught the people in their synagogue. They were astonished and said, "Where did this man get such wisdom?" And they spoke of, once again, like Mark's gospel, his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. And then finally, John 19, standing at the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Now, this is not the most accurate painting of the situation at Calvary, but it gives us the three crucified men and a group of women I've enlarged on the right. In the four Gospels, there were a total of 4 women listed as being at the foot of the cross and the tomb of Jesus of Calvary. There was Mary, the mother of Jesus. There was Mary Magdalene listed in all 4 Gospels. Mary, the wife of Clopas, and the mother of James, the younger, of Joseph, or Joses, and Salome. Then there was Joanne, the sister of Jesus' mother, in other words, Jesus' aunt, who was the mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee. What I've done here is taken from the 4 evangelists and the 4 women named by all 4 of them as being at Calvary. And I've just structured them in this table so we can see. Of course, Mary, the mother of Jesus, is in all 4 Gospels. Mary Magdalene, by the way, notice, is in all 4. Then there was a Salome or a Joanna, called this, in Matthew, the mother of the sons of Zebedee. Mark refers to as Salome, Luke as Joanna. They possibly the same woman with a Hebrew name and a Latin name. And then John says Salome or Joanna is his mother's sister. Then there was Mary, the wife of Clopas. Matthew calls her the mother of James and Joseph. Mark calls her mother of James, younger James, and of Joses. Luke calls her the mother of James, and John calls her Mary, the wife of Clopas. Now I've taken and put them all together in a genealogical chart, all right, beginning with Anna and Joachim, the parents of Mary. We know from the Gospels that Elizabeth was called a cousin of Mary. She could have been a sister to Anna. And of Elizabeth and Zechariah, John the Baptist was born. Of course, of Anna and Joachim, Mary was born, who married Joseph. Her name, by the way, in Hebrew is Miriam, and from her is Jesus. Now, Joanna, also known as Salome, was a sibling or cousin. We don't know which. They did not have words for cousin. But Joanna married Zebedee, and the sons of Zebedee we know were James and John. James the Great, who was an apostle, and John the beloved disciple, the evangelist. All right. On the other side, at Calvary was Mary, the wife of Clopas, also known as Alphaeus. Now, Clopas was obviously married to someone earlier who died, and of that union was born Matthew, another apostle. But of the union of Mary and Clopas, there was James the younger, the righteous, who became the first bishop of Jerusalem. He was the author of the epistle of James. Joses, also known as Joseph. You can see the corruption. Judas, who was known as Jude or Thaddeus, he was an apostle. He was the apostle of the epistle. And then there were 3 sisters whose names have not come down to us. Then lastly, there was a brother, Simon the Zealot, also known as the Cananean. He succeeded his brother James as the 2nd bishop of Jerusalem. He was an apostle. Now, if you notice, all the very names that James and John, James and Jude and Simon, who are called brothers of Jesus, are not brothers at all. They're cousins. This is the end of Mary the Series, Part 2C. Go on now to Mary the Series, Part 3A.